you don't know me, my name is Trey. I'm the college pastor here at Shadow Mountain, and it was nice last week to look around and see some of y'all back for the summer, and nice again to see some of y'all back. Sorry for the parking. 8th graders have a lot of graduating to do tonight, so that is why you had to walk potentially across the street or park on the street. But next week, it'll be gone, don't worry. We've been in Ruth for the past couple of weeks, and we're going to be in Ruth again tonight. We're going to be picking up in Ruth chapter 3. Last week, as we were looking at Ruth chapter 2, we saw a couple of things. We saw that God is always working. We saw that God is working purposefully, He's working intentionally, and He's working faithfully. That in the midst of everything that's going on in life, God has a plan, that He is working, that He is in control, and that He has a solution to all of the problems that we face. And we saw that in the book of Ruth, because Ruth and Naomi, they've come back from Moab. They find themselves at the beginning of the barley harvest, and they are hungry. So what does Ruth do? Ruth says, hey, I'm going to go out, and I'm going to go to the field, and I'm going to glean in the fields. I'm going to do what the other lower class, the other impoverished classmates would do. They would go around to the field, they would pick up what was left over, they would pick the edges of the field so that they could eat. And as Ruth is doing that, she encounters this new character, Boaz. And we know that Boaz, because in chapter 2, verse 1, we see the identity of Boaz, that he's a relative of Naomi. So we know that Boaz has a little bit of vested interest in the well-being of Naomi and of Ruth, and he shows Ruth this incredible generosity. He goes far above and beyond anything that would have been expected of him. He allows her to glean in his field and to follow his servants, so not just picking up the scraps, but following his servants and picking up even the good parts of the harvest. We see that he protects her. He instructs his servants not to harm her, not to touch her, not to inflict any ill upon her. And then we also see that he sends her home with just this huge amount of food, way more than anybody would have ever expected her to come back with. She's coming back with potentially 42 pounds of food from the field back home. Just this incredible act of provision for Ruth, this incredible act of generosity. And we saw that Ruth in Ruth chapter 2 was very willing to take the initiative. And tonight in Ruth chapter 3, we are going to see that same reality, that Ruth is going to take initiative, that she is going to be proactive about meeting the need that we face. So that's where we pick up in Ruth chapter 3. It says this: Then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, "My daughter, should I not seek rest for you, that it may be well with you? Is not Boaz our relative, with whose young women you were? See, he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Wash therefore and anoint yourself, and put on your cloak and go down to the threshing floor, but do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. But when he lies down, observe the place where he lies. Then go uncover his feet and lie down, and he will tell you what to do." And she replied, "All that you say, I will do." And we're picking up a couple of weeks after the barley harvest. So the barley harvest happens, and then right after that, the wheat harvest happens. And then we enter into this part of agrarian life, agriculture, where you are threshing and you are winnowing. So what is threshing and what is winnowing? Threshing is whenever they would bring the harvest, they would put it on the ground, and they would either use tools, or they would use rocks, or they would even have hooved animals come in, and they would separate the food from the stock. It was their way of separating all of it so they could gather the food itself. And after that, and even in the midst of that, they would be winnowing, where they would grab what was left over, they would throw it up, and whatever the wind took away, that was either used for food or it was just discarded. And whatever remained, that was the heavy food. The food would be heavier than the leaves. And so that's what would remain. And it's this process of getting the food and then using what's left over for fuel for the animals, for their food, or just discarding it because it was too small and the wind took it. It was this long process of getting everything that was needed. So the barley harvest would have occurred first, and then the wheat harvest. And now we're probably about 6 to 8 weeks removed from the very end of chapter 2. And so as that's happening, we see that Naomi has this worry for Ruth. She says, "My daughter, should I not seek rest for you, that it may be well with you?" And this would have been Naomi's responsibility. Naomi would have been responsible as her mother-in-law to seek her welfare whenever she was widowed. It would have been her responsibility to seek the provision and protection for Ruth. And the way to do that in this culture was to get her married. And Naomi has seen the character of Boaz. Naomi has seen the care that Boaz has shown Ruth. And so she comes up with this plan. She is playing a little bit of a matchmaker. I don't know about y'all, but I know a lot of parents, my mom included, used to love to play matchmaker for me whenever I was in high school and college. She's like, Trey, I found this godly girl. She works for me in the preschool ministry. You should so go talk to her. And I'm like, Mom, I have no interest in going to talk to her at all. I'd rather go play basketball. That's where I was. But our parents, they want to see us get married generally. And they, at some point, want you to leave the home. This is where Naomi is for Ruth, as she is caring for, she's seeking her provision. She says, my daughter, should I not seek rest for you, that it may be well with you? Her goal, her hope is that Ruth would have provision and protection for the rest of her life, not just right now. And so she comes up with this plan. She says, is not Boaz our relative, with whose young woman you were? See, he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Wash, therefore, and anoint yourself, and put on your cloak, and go down to the threshing floor. But do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. So she's got the plan together, and she's telling Ruth exactly what she needs to do. And this is a little bit of a weird request or statement that she's going to make. But whenever she's first getting started, whenever she's getting this future together, she's instructing Ruth on what to do. And she says a couple of things. She says, go wash yourself, go anoint yourself with perfume. So, hey, go be clean and smell good once you get there. Right? That's going to be really helpful if you're going to attract Boaz, if you're going to make him interested in this proposition, then you should probably be clean. You should probably smell good. And then the next thing she says, put on your cloak, and that's not for appeal, that's for warmth. She's going to have to go, and according to this plan, she's going to have to wait a little bit until Boaz is asleep. And so she's saying, hey, put on your cloak, provide for yourself, be warm when you go, so that you're not freezing by the time it gets there. And so she's giving this intentional plan. She's not saying, hey, Ruth, you should go pursue Boaz. Good luck, go make it happen. But she's saying there's an intentionality behind what it is we're going to do. We're going to be thoughtful in this. We're going to be intentional in this. We're going to have a plan, and we're going to know how to execute it. And she doesn't just say what she is to do, but when she is to do it. Right? So it's not just about having the right person. It's not just about identifying the right person and going after them haphazardly. But there's going to be a time and a place. And when is the time and place for Ruth? It says, when he lies down, observe the place where he lies, and then go uncover his feet and lie down, and he will tell you what to do. Now, it's pretty clear here that Ruth has no idea what this practice is. It's pretty clear here that Ruth has not heard of this practice or engaged in it, because Naomi is telling her what to do and then saying, hey, once it gets started, you don't have to worry about what's going to happen. Boaz is going to take care of the rest. Boaz is going to handle it. And so she's saying there is an intentional time and place and person that you need to go out of your way for. If you're going to execute this plan well, it is that the time, the place, and the person all matter, and they have to be intentionally selected. Take your opportunity, here it is, and then go act on it. And then once you get there, don't worry, Boaz is going to take care of you. And this is putting a lot of faith in Boaz from Naomi. At this point, whenever Ruth gets there, Boaz is going to be in complete control. She's going to be on the threshing floor, and we're going to talk about some of the difficulties with that here in a second. But Boaz is going to be in complete control of the situation. And Naomi is entrusting Ruth to Boaz that he is going to deal with her rightly, that he's going to deal with her kindly and purely and justly and graciously and compassionately. And so she's putting this trust in Boaz. And what does Ruth do? She puts her trust in Naomi. She says, and she replied, all that you say, I will do. So despite the fact that Ruth is not familiar with this plan, despite the fact that Ruth has never heard of this practice most likely, she trusts Naomi so much. She trusts Naomi's intentions. She trusts Naomi's intentionality and her thought behind it. She says, everything that you do, everything that you say, I am going to go do. I don't know what's going to happen, but if you trust Boaz, I'm going to trust Boaz. I'm going to trust you. So that's where she is. And it says in verse 6, so she went down to the threshing floor and did just as her mother-in-law had commanded her. So we're leaving the house in Bethlehem and we're going to the threshing floor out in the fields. And it says that she did everything that her mother-in-law had told her to do. Now, a lot of people, especially a lot of commentators, they like to take this and they like to over-sexualize this passage. And there's all kinds of reasons that they come up with for why this was a sexual encounter, but there were a couple of reasons that the threshing floor had this same kind of concept behind it. The threshing floor was known for housing a lot of sexual immorality and sexually illicit activities. And that's because most of the time, for most of the year, the men in the town would stay within the walls. They would sleep within the walls of Bethlehem. But there were a few times throughout the year where they would sleep outside of the walls. And the threshing floor, the time of threshing and winnowing, was one of them. They would do it because they wanted to protect their food from thieves or from animals coming in. They wanted to make sure that it stayed with them. And during that time, while they were all outside of the walls of Bethlehem, prostitutes would oftentimes come and they would offer their services to the men. And so it was known for being a sexually perverse area. It was known for being a dangerous and vulnerable area, especially for women. And so as Ruth is stepping into this, she's not just putting a little bit of trust in Naomi or Boaz. She is putting a lot of trust. She is intentionally and willingly going into a place that she is going to be vulnerable and potentially in danger. And in that, she is trusting that the Lord is going to take care of her and that Boaz is going to take care of her. But the idea that this was a sexual encounter doesn't line up with the rest of the way that we see Ruth and Boaz characterized throughout the passage or throughout this book as a whole. We see that Boaz in chapter 2 is recognized as a worthy man, that he's a man of high character, that he is a man with a good reputation. And we see even in chapter 2 that Ruth is someone that has very quickly built up a high reputation. So there's no reason to read into this passage any type of sexual impurity or sexual activity, but that is something that time and time again some commentators have looked for and have tried to place in this passage unfairly. So what actually happened? What is actually going on? So Ruth is at the threshing floor, and it says, and when Boaz had eaten and drunk, and his heart was merry, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain. Then she came softly and uncovered his feet and lay down. At midnight the man was startled and turned over, and behold, a woman lay at his feet. And he said, "Who are you?" Now I think that's probably a fair response. If I had had a big dinner and I was ready to go to sleep, and all of a sudden I wake up, even though I'm married, if I wake up and Julia has my feet uncovered and she's laying at the bed, at the foot of the bed, I'm going to be really confused. I'm going to be shocked. And so Boaz, rightfully so, laying out on the threshing floor, wakes up, his feet are cold, the wind is blowing on him, and there's this girl that he can't see because it's dark, and he's going, "Who the heck is laying at my feet? What is going on?" That's Boaz's reaction. He says, "Who are you?" And she answered, "I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer." And we see this request that Ruth makes. And in the midst of this, as this is going on, before Boaz goes to sleep, this time of winnowing was a time of joy. It was recognizing that the Lord had provided, that the provision of the Lord was present. And so because of that, him and his servants are having this meal and they're enjoying this drink, and at no point does it even insinuate that Boaz is drunk, but he has enjoyed his meal and he's got a full stomach and he's ready for bed. He goes to sleep and he wakes up with Ruth there. And he says, who are you? And she says, "I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer." And this is Ruth's proposal to Boaz. This is Ruth's request to Boaz for provision and protection. This idea of spreading your wings over someone, it was this, and we actually see this in Ruth chapter 2. Boaz says to Ruth, he talks about how it is good that she has come to Israel and how she has sought refuge under the wings of the Lord. And he speaks this blessing over Ruth in Ruth chapter 2. So we see that this is beginning to come to fruition. And she makes this request, she makes this proposal to him, and she recognizes that not just is he able to provide protection and provision, but that he's also this, what we call a kinsman redeemer. And this concept of a kinsman redeemer is so important to the overall story of Ruth. And really what we see as New Testament believers today, we can look back and we can see Boaz as what's called a type of Christ. Someone who is showing the characteristics of Christ in the Old Testament that is a foreshadowing of what is to come in the New Testament in the person of Jesus. And this idea of the kinsman redeemer is so important for us as believers today because we have a God who humbled himself to come and live and dwell with us, to be like us, taking the form of a human, and had the loving ability to redeem us by sacrificing himself for our sin and defeating sin and defeating death. And in that way, because of the victory that he has won, we have been redeemed, we have been made new. In the same way here, Boaz is going to redeem the line of Naomi and the line of Elimelech. And this idea of the kinsman redeemer was one that was so necessary in the Old Testament law. It was where if you were related to the husband and he had died, then you'd have the option to redeem that lineage and the property for the widow. You would marry her, and then the kids that y'all had, they would be the continuation of your brother or your cousin's, depending on how close you were in relation, your brother or your cousin's descendants. So this was an extremely important concept for not only Israel, but also for us as believers today. So this wasn't something that was obligatory. Boaz didn't have to do it, but this was an option that if you really cared for the people, you really cared for the family that you had, and you really cared for the widow, then this was something that you had the option to do. And so that's where Ruth comes in and she says, I recognize that you're a redeemer. I recognize that you are able to redeem not just me, but also Naomi. You were able to redeem the line of Elimelech. You were able to provide protection and provision for us. And what is his response? We see in verse 10, and he said, may you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter. You have made this last kindness greater than the first, and that you have not gone after young men, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you all that you ask. From all my fellow townsmen know that you are a worthy woman. And now that is true, that I am a redeemer. Yet there is a redeemer nearer than I. Remain tonight, and in the morning, if he will redeem you, good, let him do it. But if he is not willing to redeem you, then as the Lord lives, I will redeem you. Lie down until the morning. And so his response is, hey, I'm willing to do it. I am willing to sacrifice to redeem the line of Elimelech. I'm willing to sacrifice to provide provision and protection for you and for Naomi. But even before that, he says, you've made this last kindness greater than the first, that you have not gone after young men, whether poor or rich. It kind of seems like Ruth had options. It seems like Ruth, because she was known as a worthy woman in the town, because she was still young enough to remarry. He doesn't say, you rejected the young poor men, but also that she didn't even go after the young poor men or the young rich men. She could have had other suitors, other people who were interested in her, but what she does is a show of loyalty to Naomi. Because if she goes and she marries somebody that is not in the line of Elimelech, then Naomi is still in need of redemption. Then Naomi is still going to be in poverty. Then the line of Elimelech is not going to continue. Then the land that Elimelech owned, because it can't be owned by a woman, is going to be lost. And so she selflessly goes to Boaz and submits herself to him and makes this request for redemption through him on the behalf of Naomi. This is an incredibly selfless act that she is engaging in. And so Boaz resolves to find a solution to the problem. It's not a question of if she will be provided for, but who will be providing for her. It is going to be either Boaz or this closer relative in the line of Elimelech. And so it gives Ruth this rest. She doesn't have to worry about what the future is going to hold anymore. She doesn't have to worry about if she's going to be protected or if she's going to be able to eat or how she's going to provide for herself and for Naomi. There's finally this idea of rest in the book of Ruth. The question isn't, will she find rest, but who is going to provide it? Will it be Boaz, or will it be this other closer relative? And at the end of that, it says in verse 14, so she lay at his feet until the morning, but arose before one could recognize another. And he said, let it not be known that the woman came to the threshing floor. And he said, bring the garment you are wearing and hold it out. So she held it and measured 6 measures of barley, and he put it on her. Then she went into the city. And when she came to her mother-in-law, she said, how did you fare, my daughter? Then she told her all that the man had done for her, saying, these 6 measures of barley he gave to me. For he said, you must not go back empty-handed to your mother-in-law. She replied, wait, my daughter, until you learn how the matter turns out. For the man will not rest, but will settle the matter today. So the story of Ruth is coming to an end. And it really kind of leaves us on a cliffhanger in chapter 3. We get to see, hey, the end is nearing, the end is coming, God is working, but we don't quite know how the story is going to end. But as the morning comes, it's still dark outside, and he says to leave before morning comes, and he tells the servant, let it not be known that the woman came to the threshing floor. We see already that Boaz is beginning to provide provision for Ruth. He's protecting her honor because, again, the threshing floor was known for this sexually illicit activity. So if the sun were to come up and everybody were to see her with Boaz, the reputation that Ruth had built up over the course of weeks and even potentially a month or two, the reputation that she'd built up in the town could have all been torn down immediately. So what does Boaz do? Boaz takes initiative to protect her reputation, and he says, hey, don't let other people know that Ruth was here. Nothing immoral went on, nothing immoral happened, but I don't even want to allow people to think something went wrong, to allow people to think that something happened, and so I'm going to take it upon myself to protect her. And what does he do? He sends Ruth back full. The story of Naomi is she left full. Whenever she left Bethlehem, she went to Moab, but she came back to Bethlehem seemingly empty. She thought because she had lost her husband, because she had lost her 2 sons, and all she had was this little Moabite daughter-in-law, she thought that her life was hopeless. She thought she had come back empty. In chapter 2, Boaz allowed Ruth to return to her house full with food, and now Ruth is returning to Naomi, not just full with food, but full with hope. Full with this good news that something good is coming, that this nightmare that Naomi has been experiencing, that this difficulty, this trial that Naomi has been experiencing is coming to an end. And Boaz is going to find this solution quickly. He's not going to wait around. He's not going to drag his feet. Whenever he wakes up in the morning, he is going out, and he's going out with a mission and a plan to redeem Naomi and Ruth at whatever cost necessary, whether it's going to be his relative or him. He is going to provide and redeem this family. And so at this point, Ruth has done everything that she can. And I can't imagine but think that at the end of this, she's filled with some excitement, but also some worry. She's filled with some excitement that, man, I've done it all. Boaz is saying that everything is going to be good, but she's also filled with this worry of, well, what if it doesn't actually happen? What if God isn't actually working? What if God doesn't actually come through? What if Boaz doesn't actually come through? What if the sun comes up and the sun goes down, and when the sun rises the next day, I'm still not redeemed. I still don't have Boaz. He hasn't done anything. What am I going to do at that point? Ruth has done everything that she can, and now she has to sit and trust that Boaz is going to come through. And for us as believers, that is oftentimes where we find ourselves. Ruth has exemplified this willingness to be proactive. She has identified problems, or Naomi has identified problems, and Ruth has proactively sought the solutions. In chapter 2, she was proactive in going out to the field. In chapter 3, she was proactive about going after Boaz and making this a seemingly abnormal marriage proposal and this request for redemption. In chapter 2, God came through and Boaz came through. In chapter 3, seemingly, that is on the edge of what is about to happen. But there's still this feeling that, man, what if it doesn't? And for us as believers, that's where we find ourselves all the time, where we have been hopefully proactive about the situations that we find ourselves in. Whenever God allows us to go through situations, whenever God puts us in situations and circumstances, we have a responsibility to faithfully and obediently seek out solutions, trusting that God is going to provide. But what about whenever we've done everything that we can, everything that has been in our control, we have done it to a T, and now we have to wait? That is where Ruth is now, and that's the lesson that we see in Ruth chapter 3, is that at some point, we've done everything that we can. And at that point, we need to patiently wait that God is working. We need to patiently wait, trusting that God is working. That's difficult. That is hard. It's not always comfortable. But because we can look back at the story, we can look back and go, man, I don't get it. I may not want to wait, but I know that my God is faithful. I know that my God is true. I know that my God is intentional. I know that my God is purposeful. And I know that my God is working. God doesn't call us as believers to be passive. God doesn't call us whenever things go wrong in our life to sit there, throw our hands up and go, God, I guess you're going to have to provide. And us be doing nothing about it, us engage in this apathetic attitude. No, God calls us to be like Ruth, identifying problems and seeking solutions as we follow Him faithfully. And in that, as we are proactive in our faith, as we are proactively taking steps to seek solutions, there comes a point where it is no longer in our control. There was an issue in the church that I worked at in Texas where we had this student who had done some things that I thought he should have been removed from the church. I thought he definitely shouldn't have been in the college ministry. But I didn't have the power to remove him from everything. So for me, my role, what God had called me to do, was proactively remove him from the college ministry to protect some of the students in our ministry. Now, I could only handle what I could control. Everything else was out of my hands. I didn't get to control the timing. I didn't get to control the result. God had called me to proactively seek justice in the way that He had empowered me to, and entrust the rest to Him. And it didn't happen in the timing that I wanted. It didn't happen in the way that I would have had it happen. But God was still working. God was still faithful, even in the waiting, and it tested my patience, and that is okay. For a lot of 18 to 25-year-olds, that's not going to look like a situation at a church that comes up, but it's going to look like who you date. I guarantee that a lot of y'all, if you're single, I guarantee y'all are looking at, man, who am I going to marry? And that's okay. That is an okay question to ask. And you can be proactive about looking for your future spouse. But there comes a point where that is outside of your control, and you have to trust that God and His timing is going to provide. It may look like a new job, and you are seeking out a new job. You don't like where you are now, and you are proactively seeking a new solution or a new place to work. And you're doing everything that you can. You are submitting resumes, and you're going in for interviews, and you're going to all of the places and asking if there's anything that you can do so that you can get this job. And you're having to patiently wait that God, knowing that God is going to provide in His timing. This is where we find ourselves so often in our faith. We have to learn to be willing to wait. We have to learn to be willing to patiently trust that God is working. And so our question that we have to answer tonight is, what areas do you struggle to trust that God is working? What areas do you see in your life where you want total control and you're seeking total control, but you got to recognize God has not given that to you? There's no situation that you will ever encounter that you have total control of. What is that area in your life that you are seeking that control, that you are being proactive, but maybe overly proactive? What do you need to give to the Lord in that way and say, God, I don't get it, I may not like it, but I'm going to patiently wait, trusting that you are in control, trusting that you are working, trusting that you are faithful, that you are purposeful, that you are intentional. Lord, I'm going to give that to you. And then how can you, in the midst of that waiting, how can you trust that God is going to provide? How can you trust that God is still present, that God is still with you, that God is still working, that God still has a plan? How are you going to do that this week? I'm going to pray for us, and then we'll go into our time of discussion. Lord, we thank you for the story of Ruth. The God, we get to see some of the highest highs of these different characters, and we get to see the lowest lows. That, Lord, your word does not sugarcoat situations. Your word does not portray people in a way that is false, but we get to see Naomi struggling with her faith in chapter 1. And we get to see her recognize your plan in chapter 2 and recognize your provision in chapter 2. And we get to see her and Ruth be proactive about the solution and learn to wait patiently for what it is you're going to do. Lord, I pray that that would be the case for us tonight, that we would learn patience, that God, we would be proactive in our life, recognizing that you have not called us to apathy, but to action. But Lord, in that action, you have not given us total control. Would we simply be faithful with what you've entrusted to us? And would we wait for the result with open hands, knowing that you are good, knowing that you are purposeful, intentional, and faithful? Would you show us the areas that we need to give to you tonight? And would we develop a plan to actually do it? Lord, would you prove your faithfulness to us once again? In Jesus' name, amen.